In military strategy, there is one golden rule that has existed since ancient times. Control the high ground. Whoever holds the high ground holds control. They see the enemy first, shoot farther, and survive longer. But what if the high ground is unwanted? What if the enemy, who should be desperately defending that strategic position, simply leaves it empty? In 1939, during the brutal winter war between the Soviet Union and Finland, there was a mountain on the Karelia border that local people avoided, not because of difficult terrain, but because of its reputation. Soviet troops who did not believe in superstition saw the mountain as a perfect tactical position. They sent a full company, 100 fully armed soldiers, to occupy it. They climbed with confidence, but they never came back down. And what was found on the summit days later was not the aftermath of a normal battle. It was a sight so horrifying that even veteran soldiers vomited in fear. This is the story of Mount Vottovaara, a mountain that, according to ancient legend, is a gateway to another world. Winter 1939, Europe was burning. In the north, the Soviet Union launched a massive invasion of its smaller neighbor, Finland. It was an unequal fight. The Red Army had thousands of tanks, aircraft, and hundreds of thousands of soldiers. Finland had only courage and snow. In the frozen wilderness of Karelia, advanced Soviet technology became useless. Dense forests and temperatures dropping to -40°C turned the battlefield into a white hell. Finnish soldiers moving swiftly on skis and camouflaged in white haunted Soviet forces like ghosts. In the eastern sector of the front, units of the Soviet 8th Army were trying to break through Finnish defenses. Soviet commanders were frustrated. They needed eyes. They needed high ground to direct artillery fire. Their attention focused on a single point on the map: Mount Vottovaara. At over 400 meters high, Vottovaara was the tallest peak in the region. From its summit, you could see for miles in every direction. Tactically, it was the key. Whoever controlled it controlled the valley. The Soviet command immediately ordered an elite reconnaissance company, about 100 of their best soldiers, to climb and secure the summit of Vottovaara. But something strange happened. Before the mission began, the Soviet unit interacted with local Sámi people. The Sámi are the indigenous inhabitants of Scandinavia, who still hold ancient beliefs. When the Sámi elders heard the Russians were going up Vottovaara, their faces turned pale. They warned them, "Do not go there. Vottovaara is not a place for humans." According to Sámi belief, Vottovaara is both sacred and cursed. It is a place where the barrier between our world and the spirit world becomes dangerously thin. It is home to ancient spirits that do not like to be disturbed. They said even animals avoid the mountain. Of course, to atheist, communist Soviet officers, this was all nonsense, primitive superstition. They ignored the warnings. They feared Stalin's political commissars far more than forest spirits. The Soviet troops began their ascent, and the higher they climbed, the stranger the atmosphere became. The landscape on Vottovaara's slopes was unlike any other forest. The trees were wrong. They did not grow straight toward the sun. Ancient pine trunks twisted, bent, and spiraled into painful-looking knots, as if some invisible force had been crushing them for centuries. And then there were the stones. The mountain was covered with massive stone formations called sides. Enormous boulders weighing dozens of tons, perfectly balanced atop smaller stones like legs, as if giants had stacked them like toys. And then there was the silence. No birds, no signs of deer or wolves. Small lakes they passed were pitch black, called dead lakes by locals, because no fish could live in them. At the base of the mountain, Finnish troops on the opposite side of the valley observed the Soviet movement through binoculars. They watched 100 enemy soldiers climb the strategic position. Normally, the Finns would have opened fire, but this time, the Finnish commander ordered his men to hold. Let them climb. Many of the Finnish soldiers were locals themselves. They knew Vottovaara's reputation. They knew why they had never used the summit as a defensive position. To them, watching the enemy climb Vottovaara wasn't a threat. It was a walking death sentence. By dusk, the Soviet unit reached the summit. They dug shallow trenches in the frozen ground, set up tents, and positioned machine guns. They felt safe, victorious. They were at the highest point, untouchable. The sun set. The long Arctic night fell over Vottovaara. Temperatures dropped sharply. Thick fog crept up from the valley, wrapping the strange stone formations in a haunting white shroud. Below, Finnish soldiers waited. They expected Soviet artillery fire from above. They expected sniper shots. But what they heard that night was not disciplined military combat. Around midnight, the silence shattered, not by orders, but by screams. From the dark summit came the sound of wild machine gun fire. Grenade flashes lit the fog. Then screams, long, piercing screams filled with pure terror. The screams of hundreds of men facing something they could not understand. Below, Finnish soldiers exchanged confused glances. "Who are they shooting?" one whispered. "We don't have troops up there." Maybe they're shooting each other. The chaos lasted for hours. Panicked Russian shouts echoed through the valley. They weren't firing downward. They were firing inward, into their own perimeter, in every direction. And beneath the explosions and gunfire, some Finnish soldiers swore they heard something else. Sounds not made by human weapons, low growls, possibly howls that froze the blood in their veins. By dawn, the fighting faded, not because of a ceasefire, but because there was nothing left to scream. One by one, the guns fell silent. The final cries faded, and Vottovaara returned to its deadly quiet. Below, Finnish soldiers waited for sunrise with trembling fingers on their triggers. They didn't know what had happened above, but they knew one thing. Whatever had been there was finished. Morning light finally rose over the summit. No gunfire, no screams. The mountain stood silent as if nothing had happened. The silence felt wrong. No sounds of digging, no officers shouting, no campfire smoke for breakfast. Finally, a decision was made. A small Finnish reconnaissance team, veteran ski troops who knew the forest intimately, was ordered to climb and investigate. Their fingers never left their triggers. They moved from one twisted tree to another, holding their breath with every gust of wind. They expected sniper fire, mines, nothing. When they reached the summit, they didn't find an organized military position. They found a slaughterhouse. Among the frozen stone formations and twisted trees lay the remains of the Soviet reconnaissance company. All 100 were dead. But it wasn't death itself that made the hardened Finnish scouts vomit into the snow. It was how they died. There were no bullet wounds, no mortar damage. The bodies were torn apart. It looked less like a battlefield and more like the remains of a feeding frenzy by savage beasts. Bodies ripped open, limbs torn off and scattered dozens of meters away. Heads severed, thrown into bushes, caught in low branches. The snow had turned into a vast frozen red swamp. Their weapons, Nagant rifles and DP-28 machine guns, lay scattered, barrels still warm, surrounded by hundreds of spent casings. They had fought desperately. But against what? Upon closer inspection, the wounds were consistent with massive claws and teeth, bear-like, but far more brutal than any natural animal. And then they found something worse. Some Soviet soldiers were found crouched behind rocks, still clutching Tokarev pistols or grenades. They were not torn apart. Their heads were destroyed by close-range gunshots. They had committed suicide. Faced with whatever was attacking their comrades in the fog, these men chose death by their own hand rather than confront it. The Finnish scouts were expert hunters. They searched for tracks. If wolves had attacked, there would be tracks. Hundreds of them. If a bear, there would be bear tracks. There were none. No predator footprints, no dead animals, despite thousands of bullets fired. No Finnish tracks either. Only Soviet boot prints, running in panic in every direction, ending in blood. The Finnish scouts took nothing, no weapons, no documents. They turned back immediately and never looked over their shoulders. Official reports may have labeled it animal attacks or internal chaos, but around the campfire that night, they knew the truth. The Sami warning had been real. Vottovaara had consumed its invaders. The winter war ended months later. Karelia, including Mount Vottovaara, was ceded to the Soviet Union. Finland lost land, but survived. Among locals and soldiers who served there, the mountain gained a new name. They no longer called it Vottovaara, they called it Death Mountain. To this day, the mystery of what slaughtered 100 armed soldiers in a single night has never been satisfactorily explained. Skeptics suggest starving wolves, but wolves leave tracks. Others suggest a bear, but bears hibernate in winter, and one bear cannot kill 100 men. The Sami have another explanation. They speak of Stalo, a man-eating giant or shapeshifter, a guardian of sacred places, similar to the skinwalker of Navajo legend. Today, Vottovaara attracts paranormal investigators. Visitors report strange phenomena, watches stopping, compasses spinning wildly, and an overwhelming sense of being watched. But to me, the most terrifying evidence isn't ghosts or magnetic anomalies. It's the silence of 100 lives lost in a single night without a visible enemy. The story of Vottovaara is a reminder that in war, humans believe they are apex predators. With rifles and artillery, we think we can conquer nature. But sometimes nature, or something older, reminds us that there are places in this world that do not care about flags, ideology, or military rank. Places that should be left alone.